This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Hi, I'm Uriah from CMDR Decks. This Friday, November 1st, the new Commander product, Commander 2013, hits stores. Make sure you tune into this channel on Friday, November 1st in the morning. We'll have unboxing of all 5 of the new Commander boxes. Today's deck tech is one of my own personal decks. It's from a Commander, a legend that was in the original Commander product, which came out 2 years ago. This is my Skullbriar, the Walking Grave Commander deck. This is Skullbriar the Walking Grave, my general for this deck. He's a 1/1 haste creature, and he stacks up those counters pretty quick and does not lose them as long as he stays out of your hand or your library. This is one of the most aggressive generals that I've found, and I took a different approach to this one. I didn't make it a Voltron deck, which is very easy to do with these kind of commanders, but I just made something where it's going to attack as quick as possible and kill someone as quick as possible. The longer the game goes on with this deck, the worse it is, and I tend to only usually play this in 1 versus 1 games, which I actually play a lot in my area. There's not as much multiplayer as maybe other metagames or other areas, so this is mainly built for a 1 versus 1 type of game, so it's going to go very quickly, and the general by himself will actually kill on turn 6 with nothing else, just by himself and getting counters each turn. I do have the smaller version of Skullbriar there in case it does get tucked into my hand or my library for any reason. Now I do want to try to get Skullbriar out with this deck on turn 1 and attacking turn 1 as much as possible. So at the very least, I'm going to mulligan if I can't get him out on turn 2, but sometimes I'll even mulligan if I don't have a turn 1 Skullbriar hand. So a couple cards allow me to get him out on turn 1. Elvish Spirit Guide I can remove from the game to add a green mana. Chancellor of the Tangle I can reveal at the beginning of the game to add a green mana. Lotus Petal, sacks for any color mana. I have Chrome Mox as well as Mox Diamond. These give me essentially an additional mana on the first turn for a land drop almost. I also have Gemstone Caverns in here. It's not really too bad because if I draw it later on in the game, I can go ahead and discard it to Mox Diamonds. It is a colorless land, so it does hurt some, but the ability to get it out on the first turn and get Skullbriar out and attack in the first turn makes it worth it for me to go ahead and play it in this deck. I do have 7 forests in the deck, and then 6 swamps. Let's go through those real quickly. Now, I do want to go ahead and make sure that I have multiple ways to sacrifice Skullbriar, because I do not want him bounced back to my hand or tucked into my library, so I have a couple different lands that allow me to sacrifice him. Diamond Valley allows me to sack and gain life equal to its toughness, which is very good because it can get very big quickly. High Market also sacks, but I only gain 1 life off this one. Miren the Moaning Well, I can sack, also gain life equal to the toughness, but it costs me 3 in addition to tapping the land in order to get that, so it costs a little bit more than Diamond Valley. I have a couple of lands that come into play tapped in this deck. Primarily I want lands that come into play untapped because I want to make sure I can get Skullbriar out on that first turn, and it's very important. If I have an Oran-Rief in my hand though and I can put him out on turn 2, I will generally make that play just because adding the counter is worth it. Same with Llanowar Reborn. It's a one-shot of the Oran-Rief essentially, making my general unblockable and able to get through to get those extra counters is very good if there's a stalemate, because sometimes bigger creatures can come out really quickly. So I have Rogue's Passage in here for that. Yavimaya Hollow is another way to keep my commander alive in case someone decides to play Day of Judgment or something. Now we come into lands that have black or green available for their abilities essentially for the mana. We have Twilight Mire, Overgrown Tomb, Woodland Cemetery, Llanowar Wastes, Command Tower, Bayou, Gemstone Mine, City of Brass. Urborg gives me a lot of swamps. It counts itself as a swamp, and since most of my free mana spells that I play make green, Urborg is great in there. Just go ahead and give me the black I need as well. Tainted Wood, it makes 2 colors, but only if I have a swamp. That helps with the Urborg, but it's probably one of the weaker 2-color lands in the deck. Verdant Catacombs will get me any land I need that'll get me both colors of mana. A couple of lands to destroy other lands in here. We have Wasteland as well as Ghost Quarter. And Bojuka Bog is the third land I have that comes into play. Tapped, the ability to go ahead and crypt someone's yard when it comes into play. Of course, very useful in Commander. Other lands, or other cards I should say, that remove graveyards. I have Tormod's Crypt in here, as well as Scrabbling Claws. I don't want to play Relic, because sometimes I want to keep Skullbriar in the yard if he has those counters on him. If there's a way for me to go ahead and get him back out of the yard, so I might not always want to blow up all of the yards. That's why those cards target either one graveyard or just specific cards in graveyards. We have a couple other cards that give me some additional mana here in Soul Ring, Golgari Signet, Darksteel Ingot. Awakening Zone will give me creatures that I can sack to add mana or just as chump blockers. It's a very good card in this deck. Cultivate will give me some lands later on. Veteran Explorer, with all the ways I have to sacrifice creatures in this deck, Veteran Explorer will usually die pretty quickly and whenever I want him to. Oracle of Mul Daya also gives me additional land drops. Now sometimes I don't even get to 4 mana with the deck to get Oracle of Mul Daya in play. I have won with this deck with as little as 1 or 2 lands in play. It just happens that Skullbriar is really good really quickly, and the games can go pretty crazy. Although also a sacrifice outlet that does give me mana is Ashnod's Altar here. More sacrifice outlets, Altar of Dementia, which I can sack to mill. Culling Dais, I can sack and eventually start drawing cards off of it. And Spawning Pit allows me to sack and then start getting creatures out of it. So with all of these sacrifice outlets, Grave Pact is a great addition to the deck because I can start clearing away my opponent's blockers. So when I do replace Skullbriar, I can get him in there quickly. And due to Skullbriar's low mana cost, I can actually get him back out really quickly, since he's only 4 and then 6 to go ahead and cast him the next couple of times. So I want to make sure I can get rid of my opponent's creatures as quick as possible, and sacking Skullbriar is not a bad way to do that. A couple ways I need to go ahead and get Skullbriar through is to give him evasion, because he just has haste himself, no natural evasion. So a couple spells in the deck that give him trample, Rancor, Loxodon Warhammer, Helm of Kaldra, which also gives first strike, which is less important in this deck. It's the trample that I'm primarily looking for with this card. We also have Brawn. When he's in the graveyard, it'll give my creatures trample if I control a forest. Ring of Colonia is very important because it gives me trample as well as allowing Skullbriar to grow bigger each turn. If there is a stalemate on the board, eventually Skullbriar might be big enough where he can still swing in by getting these counters each upkeep with Ring of Colonia. Horned Helm also gives me +1/+1 at trample, and I can move it at instant speed. With Orborg, everyone has swamps, so Filth is a very good card in this deck. Again, it has to be in the graveyard, but I have enough sacrifice effects that tends not to be an issue. Whispersilk Cloak is another way to give Skullbriar unblockable, which is really good. Ring of Zathrid allows me to go ahead and regenerate. It also allows me to get those counters every upkeep to eventually break out of any kind of a stalemate. Blade of the Bloodchief, not really as strong because Skullbriar is not a vampire, but it is still a very good card for putting on Skullbriar and then swinging in each time. Every time they throw a chump blocker in the way, Skullbriar is still going to get bigger, so it's almost like he's attacking and dealing the damage, even though it's not actually dealing the damage and counting towards the 21 commander general damage that I need. A couple other ways to get counters. We have Blessings of Nature, which hopefully is always miracled because getting 4 counters for 1 green mana is really good with this deck because they never go away. We also have Revenge of the Hunted. When this hits on a miracle really early, the game can be over super quickly. So the +6/+6 is huge. We have Increasing Savagery, 5 counters for 4 mana, really pretty good. Contagion Clasp, I also had Contagion Engine for a while in here, but I cut it just due to its high mana cost. As you can see, I try to keep the mana cost relatively low in this deck. I have some more expensive spells later on, you'll see, but again, if this deck goes long, it tends to lose, so I want to make sure that most of the stuff I play only costs a small amount of mana, I should say, so I can get it into play and actually use it. So Contagion Clasp only costs 2 mana, that seems pretty good for me, and occasionally I can proliferate. A couple of Spike cards in here with Spike Breeder. I generally only use these to add counters to Skullbriar. If I'm getting desperate, I can make the token with this one, but it's generally just used to pump up my commander. Spike Weaver. This one actually I do tend to save the counters for the fogs because that is pretty good. Also, if your opponent's not really paying attention, Spike Weaver plus Vigor is really good. Now obviously if you fog, you don't get the counters back on Spike Weaver, but if they only attack with a couple creatures, you block, you add a bunch of counters back up, then you fog a bunch until they start to get tired, and then, you know, you can just try to beat him with Skullbriar, getting through with his evasion and maybe getting those counters with the rings. Forgotten Ancient is good to move counters over to Skullbriar, since he's getting counters himself every time someone plays a spell, and then you can move them over on the upkeep. Vigor is in there just because it's great to swing Skullbriar or other creatures in and get them bigger without having to worry about them dying. We have Hex Parasite to eat counters. Sometimes negative counters can be put on Skullbriar even if your opponents are playing Oblivion Ring or Oblivion Stone or something like that. Just a great way to get rid of counters out there that might be causing you problems. Skull Clamp, primarily because I'm sacking Skullbriar so much that I want to try to get some card advantage back out of him, so Skull Clamp's in there for that. Not really useful for getting closer to the kill, since he can naturally kill on turn 6 for 21 damage. It's just mainly there for the card draw. Arena, also there for card draw. Survival of the Fittest, not really super strong in this deck, but it has its uses occasionally. Strionic Resonator, one of my favorite new cards. This one's out of M14. A couple of tutors with Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor. A couple of Planeswalkers here. Garruk Wildspeaker, primarily for the untapped land ability. Garruk Relentless, I like him for the dealing 3 damage to target creature. That way I can go ahead and clear out some of the smaller blockers or smaller creatures that might be getting in the way of Skullbriar early. I almost never flip him to his other side. Vraska is really good also for destroying you know, a target non-land permanent. Generally I'm not too worried about their lands unless they have a maze. So it's really the creatures I need to get out of the way with Vraska I have to worry about. So since I'm not worried about sacrificing and I want to make sure that my opponent's creatures are also going away, I play a couple of each player sacrifices creature effects or targeted player sacrifices creature effects. So we have Innocent Blood, Diabolic Edict, Chainer's Edict, and Cruel Edict. These are also good because sometimes someone will drop an early creature with hexproof that'll sit there and have a bigger toughness in Skullbriar, and I can't really get through. So having the ability to make them sacrifice and then get in for that combat damage is pretty important. A couple of targeted kill spells here in Putrefy and Eyeblight's Ending. We also have a Maelstrom Pulse and Pernicious Deed in case I need to blow up the world without Planeswalkers. Gaze of Granted if I need to blow up the world with Planeswalkers. Oblivion Stone, just so I can go ahead and maybe add a fate counter to Skullbriar and someone destroys my Oblivion Stone and maybe someone else plays theirs later. I'm still going to keep my fate counter on it even if Skullbriar dies and comes back, so that's pretty cool. We have some mass board wipe spells here with Damnation and Decree of Pain, which usually is only cycled. I don't remember the last time I even got up to 8 mana to actually hard cast Decree of Pain, so usually it's just used for its a cycling ability there. Witness to get back something from the yard, of course, always great utility. Acidic Slime to destroy the land if I'm having an issue with a Maze of Ith or some other kind of artifact or enchantment. Creekwood Liege gives a little bit of a pump and then also spits out 1/1s that become 3/3s each turn, and that's great just for having some kind of defense. The deck really is an offensive-minded deck, so it needs defense when it can get it, and that's important with that. Spirit Monger is just great in a black-green deck, especially one that cares about putting counters on stuff, and it can also regenerate, so that's cool as well. And then finally, the last card here is Grave Titan. It's just a great card that late game, if I'm really losing, if I lost Skullbriar for some reason, I can't get him back, that he can just sometimes just hit the board and take over.
Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please subscribe and favorite.